Okay, so be real with me. I say the word spy. Who comes to mind? Alex Rider? Nah. Jack Reacher? Come on. Johnny English? Get that shit out of here. There's only one name that lights a flame in film history, and that is James Bond 007. The womanizing, crown-killing narcissist James Bond. How did a character like this become a British icon? Because he just looks so goddamn classy doing it. Actually, there's a little bit more to it than that, and we're going to explore that today. Bond and beyond. Bringing back Bond. The spy genre, like most, developed from a literary tradition. Whilst action and romance fulfills escapism and is born from excitement and love, spy films' roots stem from paranoia. The very first example of this was the serial The Great War in 1897. It was a what-if story outlining a French attack on Britain's soil, masterminded by a Russian insider. A type of story that would rally defences and remind culture that they aren't invincible, showing a different kind of threat, espionage, from a different side we weren't expecting. This and similar stories were so successful that political espionage eventually became its own subgenre, reflecting and speaking of the population's political anxieties, seeing whichever country they considered to be the enemy this week beaten from the inside. It became such a breakout phenomenon that the Times newspaper described it as a class of literature that is rapidly becoming a nuisance. The themes being brought up showed how suspicious and unprepared Britain was for the idea of invasion, as both reality and literature became more mature and clever in the way that conflicts were fought. And yet still, authors continued to feed the public's imagination for sensational spy stories. The first spy films were more or less reenactments of the Boer War, a dramatic retelling of a moment in then recent history, but over time, due to gradual build-up of international tension, led to the genre finding its own feet. This trend lasted so long that it spanned the course of at least 3 wars, preparing its nations for the bleakness that was the 1930s. Countries in unrest, all militant and wary, all leading up to the outbreak of World War I, upon which the films captured a genuine threat of invasion. The genre laid largely dormant in the post-war years to revive somewhat in the wake of Nazism and future wars. Enter Bond. While the 007 novels were incredibly successful in their own right, it's Connery's portrayal of the character that truly brought him to life and made it memorable. The testament of how many films and incarnations of this character we've had through the years granted 007 icon status, and even pride of Britain. And as comical and theatrical as some of the earlier films were, some would even call them silly and veering into fantasy or sci-fi in its ridiculousness, with its gadgets and highly stereotyped foreign enemies. It was that formula, that time-set xenophobia, fear of invasion, that created the setup that we know today. Over the years, Bond would keep its iconic features with the martinis and girls, but also explore new ground. Some very strange new ground as well, including the Eastern world, martial art movies, and space. The Bond series was subject to catching in on current trends, hence the sci-fi and martial art movie spikes. They reflected the times, which over the years creates an interesting history of what we considered our threats to be, and just how deep and realistic we wanted our escapism to be. In a way, Bond is a very traditional, simple hero. A basic protagonist with a winky smile who saves the day. A simple, old-fashioned hero to save us from the moral complexities and the growing intricate ways of war. He's a simple and lovable rogue, almost textbook, as refuge from our paranoias of real-life spies and morally grey agencies. From a distance, yeah, makes total sense. In more recent years, we live in a more relaxed world than that of the genre's emergence, and so the genre in turn has become more comfortable. The world's military issues in the Middle East are more covered by, propaganda dramas such as American Sniper and Black Hawk Down, meaning that our need for love espionage is not so much these days. And as a result, the iconic view of a spy became less elusive in pop culture and much more comical and spoofed. Bond himself becoming less of a reflection of the times, and more just a stereotyped character of himself, meaning that he is now more of a textbook James Bond comic book character than ever before. The word spy is now more comfortable rooted in the realms of comedy. A role so distanced in the past and separate from current world affairs that it seems again like a theatrical comical setup. The likes of Archer, Austin Powers, Spy, Johnny English, Uncle, Spy Kids and Stormbreaker in recent years cemented it as a role that can no longer be taken as seriously. In a way, this is perhaps society's healing in action. You know, taking a role from an unpleasant time in history and turning it into something silly. The fact that genuine spy films aren't peaking currently probably speaks a lot about our current state of mind. General peacetime brings minimal war and espionage coverage, and yet the world still finds itself at war. And there isn't a whole lot of fiction that wants to really dare and have the guts to address these paranoid concerns about today's world. The closest thing to it are comedy films with a death sentence, such as, The Interview and Team America World Police. Nobody wants to cover these issues, and when they do, there's usually a price to pay for it. Because within the peacetime of the 80s and 90s, Bond himself began changing into somewhat of a comedy character. Pierce Brosnan's portrayal in particular was more of an adventure serial throwback to the classic era of cheesy Bond, rather than an actual character in his own right. Which led to a series of over-the-top, critically dismissed movies, but it also buried the franchise, and therefore the genre, for a decade. The unkillable James Bond was, well, killed. Fast forward to 2005, the James Bond 10th ceremony, and the rumored next Bond is revealed to the world as Daniel Craig. A blonde man looking distinctly not what the public image of James Bond is meant to be. Bond returns, but the actor and face of the franchise is nothing if it makes the same mistakes as its predecessors. To the new millennium, a world without Bond, one with world issues of its own and thousand expectations. How do you bring back Bond for the modern age? Well, the answer lies in the mere opening 5 minutes of the finished product. All director Martin Campbell needs to sell the reboot and bring Bond back to life is captured in just 5 minutes. And the main thing? The main thing is tone. Casino Royale was the beginning of a more mature and realistic reboot of the franchise. So this scene demanded editing and presentation that would not only hook the viewer instantly, but also bring the audience into the modern day realistic era of Bond. This opening sequence had a lot to prove to the audiences of 2006. It had to not only reinvent Bond in a modern universe, but also had to establish and sell Daniel Craig as the newest incarnation of the iconic 007. He's a beloved fictional character. The masses are gonna be trying to pick him apart. And this was something hard enough to do already. A lot rested on the introduction of the character. The film had to really sell Craig to the judgmental audiences to meet all the expectations anticipated of their beloved new Bond. In context, with so much riding on this scene, the filmmakers had to pay additional detail to the establishing scene, knowing that the whole film could depend on it. Alright, let's put this film theory A-level to the test. Scene analysis, let's go. The first thing we notice about the mise-en-scène is the unusual film noir setting and absence of colour, which displays classic elegance, and gives the film the visual and audio silence to create a subtler mood than we may have been expecting from a Bond movie. This noir theme is not coincidental, and portrays many connotations of the genre. The establishing shot is large and oppressive, intimidating the audience somewhat as we introduce our first character, a man clearly portrayed by editing alone to not be Bond. The first shot we get of this man is from a low-angle mid-shot, making him seem imposing on the audience. This entire establishing shot is shot on a slight tilt. The camera itself remains perfectly stationary. This creates a quiet and moody atmosphere, but the tilt suggesting that something is amiss. This is where we're met with a high-angle close-up of our main villain, hinting that he isn't entirely in control of himself. By putting him in scale with his surroundings, he seems smaller, less intimidating. Once the man enters the room, an over-the-shoulder shot confirms that our villain is not alone and introduces us to our protagonist. The dramatic and slow reveal of our new Bond is the first moment to follow a new generation of Bond movies. This is the start of dialogue in this film, which the audience have been anticipating, as all of the opening 5 minutes so far have almost been in eerie silence. The very fact that a Bond film is beginning so subtly with an exchange of dialogue rather than the classic far-fetched action opening is very alternative and more mature in tone. Unlike his controlled, more sophisticated predecessors, this early incarnation is very clearly flawed. In terms of narrative, this seems to be a messy introduction to the film, as it goes off on a tangent from the actual plot, but despite being vacant from a lot of the scene, this entire opening is all about Bond. Both speakers keep their sentences short and to the point, which heightens the audience's tension and puts added emphasis on the words that they do say. The soft realism of the exchange, as opposed to usual Bond hijinks, makes the scene more believable. It positions it in our world and prepares the audience for a sequence of gritty action that will hook the audience in a different way. The silence is then broken, and the audience are rewarded with a quick cut to a fight scene set in a bathroom. Not an evil lair or tropical island, a dirty, claustrophobic bathroom. Our world. The slow pacing of the dialogue juxtaposes the speed and intensity of the fight scenes, which are intersected with the quiet and subtle dialogue between the villain and Bond. The once quiet and calm opening of the film rapidly escalates itself into a fast-paced fight/chase sequence. These edited constant interruptions keep the audience on their toes and uncertain of the tone of the scene. The calmer side of James Bond, as exhibited through the dialogue, reflects the cockiness and suave demeanour of previous Bonds, whilst the gritty and dramatic fight scene explores new territory with the character. And as a result, the audience's expectations and feelings towards the film. The rougher style of new Bond is often thought to be inspired by the likes of Mission Impossible and the Bourne series. More intense and brutal than the theatrical and choreographed. Close-ups, the quick cutting, and the gentle intimacy of the film is this in action. An invasion of privacy, a new side to this character the public thought they knew. The cinematography takes us on a completely different nature in the fight scene. To amplify how intense the fight is, the scene cuts whenever a hit connects, adding depth to the shot, and almost making the audience feel the heaviness of the punches. The editing and pacing of this sequence is obviously very fast-paced, frantically changing shots every half second. The camera is always placed in the most unflattering angle, just so that the appearance of the shots look even less desirable and uncomfortable to see. Audiences have become desensitized to violence since the 50s, and general editing and choreography has improved. To appeal to a new generation and a new target audience in the 21st century, the fights have to be cut bleak, morally grey, intense. Throughout the entire fight, Bond is always shown to be in control and dominant, reassuring the audience that our hero is still the central and powerful character we expect from an action film. Yet despite this, the fight is still very rough and imperfect. Even with the grayscale effect, the scenes are made to look especially dirty and unglamorous in their appearance. And although Bond is entirely in control, his movements aren't flawless like his older classic counterparts, creating a more realistic, modern, and gritty fight between Bond and Dryden. The classic Bond elements are all very well known, so it toys with the audience who have no idea what to expect with the direction of this new film. The previous knowledge and connotations of generic Bond films aren't going to help them here, because this film clearly is not that. Editing is very much about power control. Whoever is leading the scene in the dialogue will be also leading the scene with screen time, camera treatment, angles. This is classic editing stuff. The final twist plays and Bond is revealed to be one step ahead the whole time. The audience, expecting the scene to end with some more dialogue, are struck by another old convention, but broken. The villain is killed abruptly during his final line. By breaking the code of action films and not letting the villain finish their monologue, it adds a supremely suave nature that summarizes the whole scene. The usual shot staring someone through the barrel of a gun was predictable of this James Bond film, as it has always been tradition that each film begins with one. But this Bond shot is a very unexpected moment of the fight. The gunshot of Bond having lost control rather than the heroic, smug finale we come to expect from the classic films. This reveals more of this incarnation's dark, reckless nature, and it foreshadows what is to come with the character throughout the movie's story. All in 5 minutes. That's how you resurrect Bond. But it's still been a good decade since the release of Casino Royale though.
and the 007 has remained as relevant ever since. Whilst Quantum of Solace didn't wow audiences, every Craig film so far has been a box office and critical hit, Skyfall being one of the highest grossing movies of all time. And as a result, New Bond's global threats involve that of corrupt businessmen and terrorists, representing, to a smaller degree, today's war on terrorism.
Even today, using the foreign villain stereotypes, sensing a lingering mistrust in our European and Eastern neighbours, even today. Is this just done because this is what the old films used to do? Or is it because that we still, to a certain extent, don't trust the other countries? American fiction uses British villains.
Have you ever noticed how in Hollywood movies all the villains are played by Brits?
Maybe we just sound right.
Stiff upper lip is key.
Since the visceral and bloodthirsty days of Royale and Quantum of Solace, the series has taken a much more refined and classy visual style. Shot more artistically, with emphasis on the pristine and elegant, whilst keeping the untamed fighting style of its predecessors. Images of terrorist attacks and famous landmarks, or even homely surroundings, such as middle of London or the Tube, perhaps ring true of the genre's origins, maybe more than ever. Paranoia. Thank you for watching.
Like the power